Welcome to the first in the Care Talk podcast series, Conversations in Care. I'm Steve Walls and I'm going to be your host throughout the series. We'll be joined by a range of sector experts and guests from both inside and outside the social care arena. As well as discussing innovation, best practice and what really matters, we get an insight into the person. We aim to make it relaxed and hope you find the series unique and refreshing. Today's special guest is the CEO of the largest provider of specialist housing and care for older people. They have the best part of 1,700 locations offering care homes, housing and care services across England. We're delighted to welcome Jane Ashcroft CBE.
Hiya Steve, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, of course, your list of accolades is endless, isn't it? Jane Ashcroft CBE, very, very impressive. Social Care Top 30 winner, which I had the pleasure of hosting that night. And I have to say, Jane, the room was full of people who are obviously very, very big in social care. And when you won that, other people are quite begrudging when people win awards. I think everybody in the room agreed that you should have won that. So it must have been quite a nice moment for you, that.
Oh, that's very kind. Yeah, I do remember it. Well, I sort of remember. They're always a bit emotional events like that. It's always a surprise. I always just love being in a room with loads of other people from the sector, which is something I'm really missing at the moment. It's nice to be in a virtual room with you. But yeah, it was a great evening. And I think anything that raises the profile of social care, I'm delighted to be involved in because it's such an important sector. So I always say, I just have the best job in the sector. So when I win something, I'm winning it for the 10,000 people in Anchor Hanover who are all with me.
And of course, CBE, Jane, you must be so proud of that, and so must your family be.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, that is, one of those kind of gulp moments where you think, really? A friend of mine still calls me the commander, which always but certainly, yeah, going to Buckingham Palace and collecting that was an amazing day. And again, I'm a commander of the British Empire because of the amazing job I'm so lucky to have in the sector that I work in. So it's on behalf of everybody really, and everybody in social care should have a medal, particularly this year of all years.
Definitely. Jane, could you just give us a little insight? How do you find out you're a CBE? Does an email come through, or is it a lovely letter, or a letter-headed Buckingham Palace thing, or?
It's a brown envelope. Ooh. That came. I'd had a really busy day. I'd got home really late at night. There was a pile of post on the side. It was like 8:30 or something. And my husband said, "Oh, there's loads of post." So I was reading it when I went to get changed, and it was a brown envelope. And I thought it might be the tax man. And it said,
usually is.
Yeah, it did look like a bill. And the letter says something along the lines of, I think it's from the Cabinet Office, and it says, I have been asked, they sort of ask you if you would accept if you were to be offered. So you still don't know. So I kind of read it and sort of swore under my breath and thought, blimey, this is a joke. Which of my friends has sent me this? And then read it again and thought, yes, this is a very formal letter. So I think you have to send something back, sort of saying, yes, thank you very much, I would be prepared to accept. And then you sort of wait because you don't hear anything else. So you wait until the night of the announcement and you think, oh gosh, here comes it. And you hope you're still on the list and you haven't been chucked off. So,
absolutely wonderful. It must be such a lovely feeling though.
Yeah, it was great. It was really lovely. Yeah.
All the years of hard work, I think, rewarded finally, which is lovely. Now, Jane, one thing we haven't touched on yet is I've said you're a Social Care Top 30 winner. You're also a CBE, but you are a lifelong Liverpool fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Born in Liverpool. Yeah, born in Liverpool in the mid-60s to a mixed family. So I've got red and blue in my family. But my granddad on my dad's side got me when I was little and took me to Anfield when I was tiny. And I can remember sitting on his shoulders in the Kop. And it's one of those early memories that just shapes you. So although I've moved around and lived all over the country and I don't live in Liverpool anymore, although a lot of my family do, yes, I am a lifelong Liverpool fan. So we're recording this the day after we got kicked out of the FA Cup. Thanks, Steve.
No, against the arch enemy as well.
Yeah. You can't be a fair weather supporter. You've got to be in for the good times and the bad when you're a football fan.
Jane, I'm from Newcastle, so best skate over that straight away. It's even worse where we are. Yeah, definitely. Now, Jane, of course, Christmas was different for everyone this year. It was quite different. What would you say is a typical Christmas for you? How was your Christmas this year, and what does it mean to you?
Well, actually, for us, it wasn't dramatically affected. I've got a really tiny family, so there's me and my other half. My parents-in-law, I've got a mum and a brother who live together in the northwest. So actually, we were able, within the constraints of what happened this Christmas, we were still able to spend the day together, which was really nice. I missed all of the usual kind of socialising and parties and catching up with people. But actually, I think this year, those of us who could have a rest enjoyed a bit of a rest. And I was just very conscious that a lot of my colleagues in Anchor Hanover and across the sector were working really, really hard over Christmas, as they always do. I mean, I said to many people, I would have loved to have been in one of our care homes this Christmas. I think in many care homes, Christmas is such a special time of year. And this year, because we couldn't have visitors in many cases, you know, colleagues just went above and beyond to make Christmas even better. So I had a great Christmas. I had a catch up with I'd not seen my mum for months, and she turned 80 last year. So it's great to catch up with her. And I had a bit of a rest. But I was also really conscious of how hard people in the sector were working to make sure our residents, despite the challenges, just had a great time.
So generally you do love Christmas, you're like me, you're not a bar humbug.
Oh no, I'm not a bar humbug. I am glad when the decorations are down there. I don't like so the decorations do my head in, but yeah, I like Christmas.
I always find once Christmas is over, the actual Christmas Day, Boxing Day, I'm happy for the decorations to come down. New Year doesn't really mean a great deal to me, funnily enough. It's Christmas is special. Obviously, I've got a little girl, which probably helps, but I've always been like that. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean, New Year's quite a nice time, I think, to just, you know, think about what you want for the year ahead, reflect a bit. I do like to sort of think, what have we achieved in the last year? What might I want to try and learn? I don't necessarily set resolutions as such, but I think it's nice to have a bit of a plan and a bit of a think. But yeah, I'm not obsessed with being up at midnight and all that kind of malarkey.
You're not one of these people who goes and gets the gym membership on the 1st of Jan and says, no more meat, this, no more wine.
No, normally I do dry January. I've done that for like 20 years. This year I decided was not the year for dry January.
Not at all. Not at all.
And yeah, I mean, thankfully my gym membership, I've had the perfect excuse not to go to the gym, haven't I? Because they wouldn't let me in. But
exactly.
I get out a bit on my bike and I do a bit of running. So I do like being outdoors. That's a real, and particularly at this time of year, any opportunity to get outdoors is worth it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good for the soul, definitely. Now, Jane, obviously we touched on the fact that it has been a very, very difficult year. What would you say is the biggest challenges that you faced this year or last year?
Well, I mean, so many things, weren't there, really? Clearly, the unexpected nature of things that happened last year, the need to make quick decisions. I mean, I think what last year taught me was it's really important to know what you're all about as an organisation. So, you know, for Anchor Hanover, when it started to become clear that there was something very unusual and different happening, it was fabulous to have an organisation where we're really clear on our purpose. You know, we are about looking after the people who live in our care homes and in our housing. And in order to do that, we have to be a great place to work, and we have to really think about the well-being of our colleagues. So I suppose the challenge was, what does it mean to focus on your residents and your colleagues when there's all this uncertainty? And I think, I mean, we've got used to, in a strange way, living with this virus now. We've accommodated so much change, haven't we, as a sector, as individuals? But in those early days, the uncertainty was a real challenge, I think, just not knowing what was coming next. And people will remember in the sector, you know, the rules kept changing about PPE and all of those kind of things. So there was lots of practical stuff. How do we make sure everybody's okay? How do we help people to self-isolate if they've got any symptoms at all? How do we make sure we get hold of PPE? But against all of that, I think it was about constantly, whatever came at us each day in those daily press conferences. I used to stand in front of the TV in the kitchen watching the press conference thinking, okay, what does that mean? Just keep coming back to, how do we make sure our residents are okay in housing and in care? How do we make sure our colleagues are able to cope with these things? And being able to make the right decisions on not very complete information a lot of the time.
I think you'll agree as well. It was lovely to hear that Chris Whitty actually went onto the wards on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and he didn't want any fuss. He didn't want any publicity for it. It was somebody else who told people. I think that's such a lovely thing, considering the guy must be working 24/7 at the moment. Yeah,
and I suspect, you know, lots of people in the sector have got a lot of different skills, and trying to kind of use your skills in the best possible way, I think is one of the things that lots of people have dealt with. So yeah, and I mean, it has felt, hasn't it, like we're all one big family: health, social care, housing. Everybody's just pulled together to make sure things work for the people who are affected by this terrible disease.
Would you say, because it was such a tough year, Jane, that there's been a few lessons learned, or has it kind of shaped the way you work going forward? Has it changed that?
Well, I think we've all learned about different ways of working, about what the priorities really are. So yeah, definitely, you know, we have, I mean, as a large national organisation, you know, in Anchor Hanover, while most of my colleagues work in our services, so they work in our 114 care homes or across our extensive portfolio of housing for older people across the country, there were a couple of hundred people working in offices, and really quickly we were able to enable people to work from home. We were enabled, a lot of my colleagues who work in housing moved from being site-based to being predominantly home-based. So it's a very practical learning. I mean, this time last year, probably not many people knew their way around Zoom and Teams and Skype and House Party and colleagues in frontline services, my colleagues in care homes, to enable our residents to keep in touch with families, people have become absolute tech wizards, whilst also being infection control obsessive, quite rightly, whilst also maintaining, just learning about new ways of testing and all of those kind of things. So I think one of the things I've learned is about sort of flexibility and being able to accommodate change. And certainly for us as an organisation, there's things we would have planned to do that would have taken us months that we had to do in days. And I think, while lots of people have just demonstrated, we all need to look back and think, blimey, look what we achieved in that and are still achieving, and sort of congratulate ourselves, our organisations, with how much change we've dealt with, while at the same time reflecting that is tiring and it takes its toll, and also being kind to ourselves a bit. So getting that balance of reflecting on the things we've done really well and congratulating ourselves, and also just being kind to ourselves and each other.
Definitely. Now, I got an Apple Watch for Christmas. I was very, very fortunate, Jane, which obviously tells you, your blood pressure, what time the dinner's ready, basically everything. Yeah. How do you think technology might change a sector? Do you think it's going to help it? Can you see changes coming in with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is a lot of the things that have helped so far have been the kind of everyday things, haven't they? Like portals, and I can say Alexa because I'm not sitting in the room in the house with she leaped into action.
And the music starts, yeah.
That's right, what's she saying now? So some of it, I think, is about how everyday technology can really, really help. And then, I mean, everybody's had to get really good at handling data. So whether it's the NHS tracker that everybody's had to complete in order to provide information. So I certainly think technology has already helped and will only help us even more going forward. Communication, as I say, both between residents and relatives, but also internally in a big organisation like Anchor Hanover. So there's about 10,000 of us working all across the country. We use something called Workplace, which is Facebook and internal Facebook. That's been incredible, not just for communicating and letting people know what's going on and getting feedback, but just people posting fabulous pictures. It was a way of getting good ideas around the organisation at speed. So a home would try something and it would be brilliant, and before you knew it, everybody was able to do it because you could watch it on Workplace. We've had videos out helping people to make sure they're wearing their PPE properly, understand how to administer the LFD test, all of those kind of things. And then I think we know there's a lot of people looking at how technology can take the sector forward. You see some fascinating stuff around robotics and monitoring. I mean, for me, this will always be a people business. I know when I talk to residents, when I ask them what they like, what they enjoy, they always talk about the people. And I think where some of the kind of higher tech interventions might come, if some of those things can help to free people up to spend more time doing the things that residents really value, then that would be absolutely fantastic. So that's my hope, is that technology enables us to be even more person-centred and people-focused in this sector.
Excellent. Now, we do try and find out about the person. Obviously, everybody knows Jane Ashcroft, the impressive leader of a fantastic organisation, but the person herself, once the restrictions are lifted, Jane, imagine you were at a dinner party. Which guests would you invite and why? Anybody in particular that you'd like at your dinner table?
Yeah, well, so many people. Well, I mean, actually, I really miss my colleagues, both my team, my senior team in Anchor Hanover, who we went through a phase in the early days when we would have lunch together. So we literally all sat in front of Zoom and everybody was kind of, it's like, what are you eating today? Oh, green soup. That looks interesting. So certainly colleagues, and not just my direct team, but colleagues from around the country. So we've got some fabulous care homes in Cornwall who are always posting pictures. The weather always looks good in Cornwall, if you noticed. And I'd love to catch up with Neil, who's the manager of one of the Cornish homes, who I haven't seen for ages. And we've got a brilliant home in Bradford where the manager there, T, she's just terrifying. She's full of energy. She's always doing amazing things at her home. So I need a big table because there's lots and lots of people in Hanover. We've got a fabulous guy who lives in one of our housing services down in Surrey, a guy called Terry Keane, who has run over the lockdown, and he started it before lockdown, a series of exercise classes that he puts out on YouTube and through various channels called 10 Today. And I always say Terry Keane is keen by name and keen by nature. You know, this is a man in his mid-70s who's always getting in touch with me and saying, Jane, do you fancy doing a half marathon with me? And then thinking about, I'm a bit of a fan of Gogglebox. One of my kind of guilty, I love Gogglebox. And I was trying to remember the names of. There's two friends who are they're in a caravan. He's called Lee. I can't remember her name. They're fabulous. I would love to catch up with them. I think their TV recommendations would be good, but also they're good company. I'm a big reader. I read a lot of stuff, and one of the books I really enjoyed recently was by Bernardine Evaristo, and I think she's a really interesting author, so I'd like her. And of course, Steve, you know where I'm going to go with this. Jurgen Klopp. Jurgen Klopp would need to come as well.
Yeah, so, I think you'd grill him at the moment though, Jane, rather than have him to sort of speak to in a nice way.
Well, you know, I'd be polite. I still think he's a hit. I still think we could do okay this season. But yeah, it would be great to. And I mean, the food would be interesting. We've got some amazing chefs in our care homes. One of the things I really miss about not being able to get out and about, I miss talking to residents, I miss meeting colleagues, and I miss some of the amazing meals I've had in some of our care homes. We've got we did manage to have our Chef of the Year competition even through lockdown. We did it virtually, we did it. So the chef at our home in Harrogate won our Chef of the Year competition. And I know other care home providers as well managed to really focus on food and dining through the lockdowns. So yeah, I think I'm going to have a series of dinner parties at this rate. But if you can pull any kind of strings to get you a dinner party, Steve, you'll be my busy mate.
I think I did tell you I once had a Chinese with Sir Kenny Dalglish, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Now, Jane, obviously, I think it speaks volumes about yourself, the way that you obviously know the names of many of your managers and stuff, which is such a lovely thing. Somebody sent me a question in and asked me to ask you because they knew I was going to interview you. And I'm going to read this actual from there as opposed to me coming up with a question. It says, as England's largest not-for-profit provider of housing, care and support, how do you ensure parity of esteem for both care workers and support workers?
That's a really good question. And
it is. I wish I thought of it.
Yeah, what are you doing? I mean, one of the joys of Anchor Hanover is the range of services that we offer. So all of our services are for older people, but that means we've got people from their mid-50s through to people. We've got somebody coming up to their 110th birthday in one of our housing services.
Oh, fabulous.
So across our 60,000 residents in care homes and housing, you know, we've got people from 55 to 110. And as I keep saying, we've got colleagues all over the country. And you have to have a balance of being consistent and sort of have a standardized way of doing some things and trying to be as efficient as we can, but also recognizing that 60,000 customers are all different, our residents are all different, and 10,000 colleagues are. But I think it is about parity of esteem. So there's a wide variety of things, really. I mean, everybody in our who contributes in our frontline services, or indeed in our back office, everybody's part of a chain that delivers a service at the end of the day to one of our residents. And in particular, I mean, some of the things we've tried really hard to do during this past period, the vaccine, for instance. So once the priorities were established for the vaccination groups, I was, of course, delighted that health and social care workers were being prioritised because it's so important. But that didn't pick up my colleagues who work in our housing services, and equally our housing colleagues work with vulnerable residents. As I say, some of our oldest residents live in our housing. So I wrote a number of times and made contact with the vaccination minister, Nadeem Zahawi, and I was delighted about 10 days ago when the government confirmed that supported housing workers are part of the priority group. So they're in group 3 for the prioritisation of the vaccine. I think sometimes social care and housing are sectors that really aren't particularly well understood what happens in our services. It's kind of easy to understand the NHS. Everybody understands the NHS. We've always said social care is kind of a difficult to understand beast. But from our point of view, it is about recognising that while people's jobs might be different across Anchor Hanover, they're all equally important. And, you know, one of the expressions I don't like is when people say, I'm just a housekeeper. Nobody's just anything, you know, a housekeeper. I know when we did some awards a couple of years ago, and I remember residents talking about an amazing housekeeper we had in one of our care homes who they called the singing housekeeper, because they always knew when she was coming to clean their rooms, they could hear her singing as she came down the corridor. And she made a huge difference to our residents' lives. So everybody in Anchor Hanover contributes, whether it's in the IT team, We've got an amazing 24-hour call team, Anchor Hanover on call. So for people living in our retirement housing, at any point they can pull a cord or press the button on their pendant and they go through to a real Anchor Hanover person who is there to help and support them. That's a really, really important reassurance to customers living in our retirement housing services.
It's not the dreaded press 1 for this and press 2 for that. They actually speak to a person.
It's a real person, and that team, they're an amazing, they know so much about the organisation because they speak to our housing residents on a regular basis.
Oh, fantastic. So Jane, as CEO, how do you ensure that your values are implemented within the organisation?
I suppose some of it's about recruitment. So some of it's about trying to make sure that we bring people into the organisation, whatever job they do, that have the sort of compassion and empathy that are so important for everybody working in our sector. And I mean, sitting in the middle of an organisation like this is an amazing privilege, but quite a challenge. So I always think my job is kind of sitting in the middle of this national web of services. Our values at Anchor Hanover pleasingly align very strongly with my personal values, and I think that's important when you're doing any kind of job. So our Anchor Hanover values are about being accountable, being respectful, being courageous and being honest, and we've got descriptions of what we mean by all of those things. So accountability, of course, is about doing what you say you're going to do. Respecting people is being respectful in the way that you talk to people, understanding people as individuals. Being courageous is about trying new things, not being afraid where appropriate to push the boundaries, try something different. And then being honest, being straightforward, telling people when we can't do something as well as when we can. And I think we seek really hard, and I think it's important to be a very inclusive organisation. We're an organisation where everyone's welcome. I want us to be an organisation that reflects the society that we live in, where people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different ages, different genders, different ethnicities can come and make a contribution and be part of a really vibrant and diverse organisation. So I think when you do a job like mine, it's about, well, when I got the chief exec job in Anchor, I'd been in the organisation for about 10 years or so, and I was very fortunate, went through the process, was appointed chief exec, and I told my mum, and my mum said, that's lovely. What on earth does a chief executive do? Which, of course, was a good question.
Yeah.
And I was tempted to send her my 3.5-page job description, but I thought, that's not what she means. And actually, it is a good, what does a chief executive do? I think a big part of my job has to be listening. So I think it's really important in a job like mine, and it's harder at the moment because I'm not out and about like I would normally be, but listening to the people who use our services, listening to their relatives, listening to the people who work in our services, so that I understand what really matters to people, what people are worried about, what they like, what the concerns are for the future. And then the other bit of my job, I think, is talking to people. So it's being able to take the Anchor Hanover plan. So we've got a very clear 5-year plan with 4 key priorities, being able to talk to people about why we've got that plan, what our priorities are, what everybody can do to contribute towards that plan. So actually, I think that's my opportunity through listening and talking to share my values and to make sure they're shared across the organisation. The end bit of that conversation, of course, is that my mum said, well, you'll be better at the talking than the listening, which you're probably finding now. So I do try very hard to listen really, really hard to the people, because in a job like this, you can sit in a meeting room and look at a spreadsheet. Meetings and spreadsheets are an important part of the job, but you also have to have that feel, I think, for what really matters to the people, as I say, who use our services, their families, and also colleagues. So listening is a really important part of values for me.
Definitely. And as you said, you could have showed your mum the 3.5-page sort of description of the job. Is there anything as a chief exec which keeps you awake at night, would you say, Jane?
I'm pretty lucky. I sleep quite well. But I think, you always, I recognise that this is a 24/7 business service. And, so if I do wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, then I do think, how's everybody doing out there? I really recognise, I've never worked nights. I've done jobs where I've worked shifts, but I've never worked nights. I did grow up, my dad was a police officer, and my dad used to work nights. And I remember what it was like in a house that was sort of governed by shift patterns. And I do think, gosh, oftentimes during the night, there's tough things happen. People are poorly in our care homes. There's all kinds of things going on. So I suppose the thing that keeps me awake at night fundamentally is the quality of what we do. Yeah. It's just making sure, I always say when people join Anchor Hanover, what we do changes people's lives. And when we get it right, it changes people's lives dramatically for the better. And, the vast majority of the time we get it right. if occasionally we get it wrong, then that's not a good outcome. So it is fundamentally the thing I think about is the quality of what we do, how we make sure we've got brilliant people working in the organisation, that we can encourage more people to come and work in the organisation. You know, social care is a sector with great opportunity, and we need to encourage fabulous people to come and work in the sector.
Do you think the physical demands and the perception of social care will have an impact on retention after the COVID crisis, Jane?
I think it's going to be, I mean, in some ways, I think the value of the sector has become clearer. I mean, we can't say that care homes haven't had a degree of focus over the last 12 months. And I think, you know, remember the first lockdown, when the sun was shining, when we were all out clapping on our steps at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. And at the beginning, that was clap for the NHS. And very quickly, that became clap for all carers. And I do think the value of the things that we do in many ways has become more acknowledged. But I do also completely recognise that people have had a really hard, demanding year. Lots of people have gone the extra mile. People have worked more hours. People have faced things that they didn't want to face. Just working shifts in PPE, I know, is demanding for people. And, you know, we try everything we can to support people with all of those things. I think there's things that can be done, you know, the government, CQC, many of us need to work effectively together to show people that this is a sector that is a great place to work. But we also have to be honest about the challenges as well. You know, there's no point recruiting people who think that this is not going to be a job without its challenges, because they won't stay for very long. So we've got to be honest about, as you have to be with all jobs really, what are the good things and what are the challenges? And as an organisation and a good employer, how do we support people with the challenging stuff? So how do we give people the right training, the right support? All of those things I think are really important.
So you think that will hopefully ensure staffing levels once the COVID pandemic ends?
I really hope so. And we've had some success with people from other sectors moving into social care in Anchor Hanover this year. So, you know, we all know that sectors like hospitality have been really affected by lockdowns. And we've been able to encourage, I think, some people who perhaps wouldn't have thought about this sector before to come and have a look and have a try. And many of those have stayed with us. We're lucky we've got a fabulous apprenticeship scheme. The apprenticeship scheme is one of my favourite things because it just brings new skills, new approaches. And I'm really proud of many of our apprentices now at team leader level, starting to look at deputy manager jobs. You know, we're really breeding our future leaders in the organisation. So I do hope that social care will be seen as a great place to work, but we can't kid ourselves. It's also got to be a place where people can build a career, can be properly rewarded. You know, it is a demanding job. So there is a kind of circle of, as well as being a great place to work, it's also got to be a sector that's properly supported financially. And I think, you know, there's lots of issues that need to come together to help us with that.
I was going to say as well, Jane, obviously it's not in the way you would have wanted, but hopefully at the end of all this, social care will truly get the recognition it deserves. What you touched on it there when they were clapping for the NHS, because I've hosted the Care Award for many years and I host for care providers and stuff, I realise how hard these people work. And I was sort of standing there saying, why aren't we clapping for social care as well? So it was nice that that finally happened. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, we need to really, really build on that and understand. And, you know, the relationships between social care delivery and NHS delivery are so pivotal that we are all part of that same chain. They're not separate things, although some things are very different. But I do think that is one of the things we need to hang on to from 2020 is recognising the contribution that people in the social care and housing sectors have made.
Yes, I think that will happen, hopefully. And finally, Jane, I'm going to ask you a question now. It's a bit off on a tangent. If you had a magic wand, imagine you had a magic wand in your hand and you could grant 3 wishes, or you could have 3 wishes. Now, take away Jurgen Klopp, titles, Champions League. I'm actually going to keep you to social care. So if you if somebody gave you a magic wand and said, right, Jane, you can do anything you want in social care, you've got 3 wishes, what would you do?
Wow. Well, I mean, we were just talking about recognition, and I think, you know, for social care as a sector to be loved and admired would be, you know, my emotional plea would be, just like, you know, we're all so proud of the NHS. So I think to be proud of, and not just the people in the sector, but I want Matt Hancock to wear his social care badge every day, not just the days when he occasionally talks about care homes. So he's got his NHS badge on most of the time. I want him to be wearing it because I want people to be proud. I want people to say, I work in social care, and their shoulders to go back and for them to say, and I'm really proud of that. So that's kind of number one. Number two is, I think there are barriers that need to be removed so that this sector can flourish. And some of those are technical things. We've talked for many, many, many years about social care reform, and the fact that basically we're running a system that was built in the post-war period in 1948. And then over the years, it's had sort of sticking plasters and things done to it, and it needs some fundamental reform. And I think a lot of that is about taking away barriers. It's about having conversations. It's about helping people in our bit of social care, which is about working with older people. It's about helping people to think positively about later life. The fact we're all living longer is really, really good news. So how do we, as a society, how does the government, we've campaigned in Anchor Hanover for a long time that there should be a senior level job in government that is a minister for older people and ageing. And that should look across social care, employment opportunities, all kinds of things. So I think an approach to social care reform that says this is a great sector that needs to be invested in and recognised. We need to take the barriers away. It's time for that now. We've talked about that change for a very long time. It's time for that to happen. And then I'd really like teenagers at school to be saying, I'd love to work in social care. How do you get into social care? What can I do to go and work in social care? And to, for us to not always be worrying about, can we find enough people? Can we find people with the right skills? But for social care to be seen as something that people aspire to. So for people to be keen to use social care services if they need them and keen to work in social care. And I think a lot of that, we're talking about leadership awards in the social care sector. Social care leaders exist across organisations. So I have a job that sounds like I'm a leader, and I hope at times I demonstrate some leadership from the middle of my organisation. But actually, care home managers are leaders. The team leader on a shift is a leader in social care. It is a sector where people have great opportunities to learn, to develop. And I think, so my ideal would be in a couple of years' time that you've got, as I say, 13, 14-year-olds thinking about their future. How do I get into social care? That looks like a fabulous sector to work in.
Oh, brilliant. Jane, I could talk to you all day. You're so easy to talk to. You're an interviewer's dream. It's been great. But unfortunately, I know how busy you are. We really appreciate the time you've given to us this morning. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you come second in the Premiership.
Thank you, Jane. Bye-bye.
Hey, Steve. See you soon.
On behalf of Care Talk, thank you for listening to the very first episode of Conversations in Social Care. Our next guest will be announced very soon, so keep an eye on our social media. A reminder that the link to nominate for the Social Care Top 30 is in the podcast description.